Sounds good, buddy.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I love this title, and I think you guys are going to love it as well, because how many of us have done something wrong? I'm pretty sure everyone can put up their hand right now and say, I've got a number of failures that I can add to my ever-growing resume. It feels like every single day we have a new failure to add to the list. But the art of getting it wrong, finding good in the misadventures of life, is the new book by my guest today, Stephen Miller. And for those of you that don't know who he is, he's the original We're the Millers family. I thought I'd throw that in for the sake of it and make it laugh. But this guy is incredibly famous on the internet, and the Miller fam is his incredible family. He's got 7 kids. I have no idea how in the world he does that. But he's the creator and entrepreneur who has grown his platform to nearly 1 million followers in just 2 years. And if you go and check out his videos on YouTube, they're pretty cool. You've also got a son with special needs, which is honestly incredible as well. Stephen, man, your new book, as I mentioned, is The Art of Getting It Wrong. People can go and get a copy wherever books are sold. It's coming out very, very soon, I believe. But Stephen, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today, my friend?
So much for having me. This is awesome. I'm so excited to get to be. I'm sort of like virtually in Australia right now, which is amazing.
You're in my virtual second bedroom. We'll call it my office.
Love it. I love it, man.
But I'm so grateful for your time, man, and for being here. The very first question that I do have for you is a question that I love asking all my guests at the very start, which is, what does success look like for you?
You know, that's changed so much over the years for me. I think right out of high school and honestly through my mid-30s, I had a lot to prove. Like, I just really did. I was pretty severely bullied growing up. I was really overweight, really short, and honestly kind of a dork, to be honest. And so, I can remember there was a real moment that shifted in my thinking where I said to myself, I'm never going to feel this way again. I'm going to show them. And like it was like a movie moment. Like, I'll show them. I'm going to be so successful. And I'm going to be an actor and a musician and a writer and all this stuff. And like, I set my attention and my effort to that for the better part of almost 2 decades. And man, like, I kind of had like a crash and burn moment. I was really, really burned out. And this is, over a couple of years where I was experiencing that. And it kind of came down to understanding and recognizing that I was defining success all wrong. Like, I thought somehow if I could win the Grammy Award or, sell this many albums or this many whatever, I would be all of a sudden like worthy of love or worthy of acceptance or whatever. Like, I would finally show them, And man, what a crock, like, you get to that point and you're in your mid-30s and you're like, nothing panned out the way that I thought it would. But wow, I've got 7 incredible children, both through birth biologically and through adoption. I've got a gorgeous, incredible wife. And we this all sort of happened like right as we were starting doing this whole online YouTube kind of thing. And like, I guess just success totally got reoriented for me, because all this stuff that I had done for so long just kind of felt meaningless to me for a while. Honestly, I had a friend die. He was murdered in Afghanistan, just walking down the street. And I'm like, man, what the heck? Like, he's one of the best dudes I know, and another friend of mine killed himself, and he was at like the height of his, everything, super successful guy. And then a mentor that I had who was more like a dad, and I talk about him in the book. His name's Jim, and he died of cancer, and there's just all this stuff sort of happening and swirling around all the time. And I'm going, dude, like, everything I'm doing is meaningless. Everything I'm doing is worthless. Like, what happens at the end of this thing? And, so there was a little bit of a break. And the beautiful thing about that is that there's also that moment to start fresh and reconnect with reality. What's actually true? versus the lies that you've been believing for so long, which for me were many, and so to get to reconnect with who I am, the core of my being, but also get to reconnect with my family. And now it's kind of like, man, I would be happy if success for me just looked like I've got 7 kids. My oldest just moved out on her own, which is insane. Like, she turned 18 and was like, I'm ready for an adventure, and moved down to Florida, near Miami. And she's just hanging out and like killing it. Like, she's awesome, And so that's a success for me. Like, if I can do that with my 7 kids, if I can have a stronger marriage this coming year than I've had in all of the 19 other years that we've been married, that's a huge win. That's a success. If I can be healthier as a person, both physically, mentally, spiritually, which I am. I talk about that in the book as well. Like, I've struggled with obesity my whole life, and I've just looked for these quick shortcut fixes. But I lost 70 pounds last year, like over the past year, and I'm going to keep it off, So that, like, success looks like, what does a healthy life look like for me? And yeah, I'm still going to try to be the hardest worker in the room and make sure I can provide a great life for my family and all that. But are my kids healthy? Is my wife healthy? Is our marriage healthy? Am I healthy? Is my relationship with God healthy? Is it stronger? For a long time, I kind of looked at like God became useful to me, if that makes sense, rather than beautiful to me. And that's a really dangerous place to be. I was working for a church, so when you do that long enough, like when God becomes your vocation rather than your like passion, that was not a healthy place to be. And so now, like, is my relationship with God healthier than ever? And I would say it is, So I think like the success defined for me looks a lot different than a metric or a number. It's not even so much a feeling. It's like, I guess it's hard to define. It's like, is everything in my life healthy? Is it growing? Is it healthy? Is it happy? Is my home a place of peace? That's success for me. And obviously there are variables that can affect that. Like, if I'm not bringing home the bacon, there might not be as much peace, so there's all that stuff. I'm not trying to like minimize like the normal things that, when you're getting started, like, success looks so different, like, I need to hit these things. But once you've kind of hit those things, and in a lot of ways, I've had a lot of wins in my life, and that have helped me to sort of reorient my perspective. But at what cost? You kind of, at this point, you get to kind of look back and go, like, there was a pretty hefty toll for a lot of that stuff. And so then you're sort of playing the art of getting it wrong. Like, how do I not let that define me, but refine me for this next season of my life? I
think you have the world's version of success, and they tell you as you're growing up, this is what you need to do in order to be, quote, worth something in society. So we chase it for a long period of time. And for a short period of time, you may feel a little bit satisfied, but not really fulfilled, because there's, I believe, ultimately a difference there. But then when you do achieve that thing that you have been striving and hustling for such a long period of time, you get there and you're like, well, now what? Now I feel, do I do the same thing again for the next thing, the next goal that I have? And it's like this perpetual wheel, this cycle that a lot of people go on that just gets them to the point where they feel utterly miserable. And when circumstances and challenges sort of come into their life and a lot of failures start to happen, they get stuck a lot of the time. They crumble under all that pressure, and they think, well, this can't be really success, can it? Because I need to be up here, not down here. Why am I down here? But ultimately what I've figured out, I think you've probably figured this out as well, is that success is down here. It's like, it's in those failures that we learn the most about ourselves. It's in those challenges that life becomes more meaningful. You learn so much about yourself, about other people, the world around you, who God is, all these things more than what you do up here, which is what the world tells you you're going to learn a lot, right? But
Yeah.
it's so not true.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've learned so much more from my failures than from my successes, and I do feel like my goal with every mistake and every mess up is that I come out with it, getting more out of it than I lost from it. But that comes with owning it and like taking responsibility. And, some of those things are not easy to do, especially when you're young and first starting out. Like you feel like you've got so much to prove. And I just, at this point in my life, like I feel like the only thing I've proved is that like God is really gracious to me, which is a pretty great thing to have proof when you really look back on it. It's like, well, I haven't really proved that I'm that great, but I proved that in spite of the fact that I'm a big mess up. And, if you read the book, like you're gonna be like, dude, how is this guy alive? Like, how is he still alive? Because it's just like one story after another. Or how has his wife not killed him? How, like I have messed up in more ways than I even know how to count, But with every failure, it's like, this could be my biggest blessing, my biggest teacher, my biggest gift in all reality. And I think that there is something to be said about that. Like, so, I think success for me now too looks like not being afraid to try something new, because I think, I wrote the book really for both my kids and my peers, like when I look at my kids and there's so much, and not even just them, but like their friends and sort of their generation, there's so much anxiety and fear and worry over messing up and not getting it right, that it sort of paralyzes them from being able to step out and be courageous and do something great, that would bring them a lot of joy, and for me, I'm in a group of people who are on the other end of that, who maybe did try some things and failed miserably, or did try some things and it didn't really, they're looking at their life going like, this is it, like this is all there is to it, and so then they feel like they're a failure because what they had hoped for all those years is not really panned out. And so, the book really is to try to like encourage a whole variety of people that like, look, it's okay to fail. Like, just go for it. Your failure's not final, your failures aren't who you are. That's not your identity. They can't define you, but they can refine you and set you up for that next step. Like, you're always becoming something. Who are you becoming? And your failures are shaping who you get to become. If you'll let them, your perspective is a lot more important than your circumstances. If you'll let your failures reorient your perspective, you could have a freaking great life.
I love how you said your failures don't define you, they refine you. And that's an important message that needs to be shared far and wide to, especially for young people. Because I mean, I'm a lot younger than what you are. And I wish that I had all this information when I was growing up, because maybe it might have helped a lot. Maybe it might have stopped me from going down and doing some stupid things that I decided and I chose to do. I mean, you have the failures that ultimately, I guess you make, you choose to make them. And then you have those, I guess, those things that come about in your life that you can still make a choice to go either this way or that way. But yeah, I think this is a really, really needful message. And I can relate to what you were talking about before, like, how is this guy still alive sort of thing. That's very similar to me.
Yeah.
And just when you think, like, when I was writing my very first book, sorry to take it away from yours for a second, but when I was writing mine, I opened the book, the introduction. I'm like, just when you think a story is over, surprise, it's not. Like, it keeps on going, and it might make you start questioning, how in the world is Jay still standing? How is he still here? So I completely understand and relate. And a lot of that came down to my own selfish choices and my own stupid decisions that led to failures, but they ultimately set me up for my successes later on.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, I think that the ability to step back and humble yourself in the midst of something, and sort of analyze the situation as much from an objective viewpoint as you can, and just say, okay, like, where did I go wrong here? What can I learn from this? And how do I grow? That's something that I mean, really the hope for me is that, like, people will read this and they won't necessarily have to make the same mistakes that I made, because there's a lot of stuff that you look back, like the first chapter, not the first chapter, one of the early chapters is called Sticks and Stones May Break My Bones, but Words May Jack Me Up Forever, and like that stuff sticks with you, man. Like there's stuff I said in my early 20s that still comes back to haunt me sometimes. There's stuff that was said to me when I was, in middle school that still comes back to haunt me to this day, And so when you start to recognize like the value of every moment and the weight of every word, and, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to mess up again, but it does. I think maybe it humbles you enough to kind of start looking at your own life and taking, some stock in those moments, to slow down a little bit more and maybe not make the same mistake again, or maybe not try to like stick your head in the sand or dig your feet in, your heels in, so that you don't have to own it, or it can't be your fault or whatever. Like, I mean, I've started to kind of go to like, it's probably my fault, like in a situation, just begin there, rather than trying to blame shift or point fingers. If I can just start with me, which is really the only thing I can control, I think in the end, we all get a lot more out of that way, rather than trying to figure out who did this to me, like finding the root cause. Maybe you're not the ultimate root cause, but you can probably find some ways that you could have done things differently, and then own that, and then address it as best as you can. Be a man of peace, be a person of peace, be a person who apologizes easily and forgives easily, who watches his words and watches his, actions a little more carefully,
When you do stuff up, it does hurt for a period of time. Yeah. And I've always been curious, maybe you might be able to help unpack this a little bit more for everyone listening, but why do you think that God created failure ultimately?
Well, that's a big question.
I love the big questions, man.
I love it. This is a shot in the dark, but he is completely unique, right? God is completely unique. And there's something beautiful about grace, and there's something beautiful about mercy that without failure we wouldn't be able to really savor. You know what I mean? Without the mistakes and the mess ups and the, all that, it wouldn't be as good. Like if the bad news isn't really bad, is the good news really good, Mm-hmm. And so, this is like a totally flawed analogy, as every analogy will be in the end. But is Harry Potter really great, or Dumbledore really great, if Voldemort is not really bad? You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of humanity that I think we all get, is that like we're all the ones who get it wrong. Like I may feel like a good guy, but like I know when I lay down at night that, man, like if only people knew, fill in the blank. If only they knew the real me. If only they knew all the ways that I've messed up, then not even, I've never told anybody or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, but the fact that God does know, and still loves me, and still chooses me, and still forgives me, and still gives me an infinite hope and an infinite life and an infinite, like there's something really beautiful about that. And I think that's ultimately what the soul longs for, is unconditional acceptance and genuine love, and genuine like God doesn't just like sweep it under the rug and then sort of tolerate you for all of eternity. Like he genuinely likes you. And so the fact that I know deep down how bad I really am, and I know deep down how good God really is, makes eternity sweeter. You know what I mean? It heightens my joy. It heightens my delight. Now, certainly if there's no failure in the world, then there's no suffering in the world. There's no hunger in the world, no war in the world, no whatever. There's all those things. And we can get down that rabbit hole really, really beyond my ability to explain. But I think at the core, like, God made us to delight in him because he knows that that's the greatest joy. It's an infallible joy. There's no tainting it. There's no diluting it. There's nothing. Like, you can't, it's not like, there's no law of diminishing return. Like, the more I love God, like, there doesn't become less of him to love. There's no flaw, there's never a moment where he looks at me with a, there's never a moment he despises me, or like, I'm unconditionally accepted and loved, which God made us to long for that. And I don't know that it would be without the failure, without the getting it wrong. I just don't know if that would be as amazing to us. And therefore, without amazement and awe, do we really have joy, like lasting joy? I'm an awe. I go after the awe, man. I go after the wonder. I go after the amazement. That's why I go to the Grand Canyon. That's why I go to, I'm like begging my wife to go to Glacier National Park and Yellowstone and Iceland and New Zealand and Australia. And like, I'm a travel fanatic because I'm sort of like chasing awe and chasing wonder because it heightens my joy, And I think that's what grace does for us. It gives us, when we truly understand it, at least as best as we can as humans, it gives us a greater sense of awe and wonder and amazement, which ultimately is joy. But it's not like awe and wonder and amazement and joy that's like here for a second and then gone. Once we stop, we're not at the Grand Canyon anymore, so our awe is gone. It's a safe but consuming awe. It's not like, we'll talk about, the Australia thing, Point Break, like it's that wave that they're chasing because they need to get that wave, whatever. And then the guy dies, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it. It's really a really old movie with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. So if you haven't seen it, you should, I don't know if you should watch it or not, but like, they're just chasing that high, and in the end, it's not like that. It's like that's that level of chasing, but it's right here chasing us instead. I don't know. That's really philosophical, but I think that might get to the root of it.
I think it does. And for me, like, listening to what you were saying, what I love the most about it is it doesn't matter how much I stuff up or what I say or what I do. Ultimately, God still loves me. I'm still one of his children. And I love how nothing can separate us from the love of God. And because it was love that sent him down here in the first place. And it was love that kept him on the cross. It was love that ultimately made a way for us to be with him forever, because he knew ultimately that we were going to mess up, and we were messing up for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We've been messing up, and we will continue to do that until Christ comes back again. And, we live for all eternity. But I always say that I owe God everything. He owes me nothing. And yet he continues to give. And he gives grace to the humble. He gives me strength every single day to get up and do the things that I need to do. And God gives me everything that I need. It might not be exactly what I want in the moment, but it's everything that I need for my learning, my growth. And that includes the failure. He ultimately gives us free will and the ability to choose, which I think is ultimately a massive, massive crutch in of itself. If you really think about it. But it's just a massive perspective shifter, man, when you realize that, hey, there is someone out there that does love you despite what you've done or what you will do. And that's life-changing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm convinced, that if you don't find that in Jesus at the cross, then we're all damned. You know what I mean? Like, because the world is not really in the habit of extending grace to people who have messed up.
No.
I mean, you just see it all the time. People say something stupid, and then it's like, like our failures are carved into the concrete, and our wins are sort of like drawn with fingers in the sand. Like that's the life that we're in. That's the world that we're in. So, if it doesn't come from the cross and if it doesn't come from Jesus, then where are you going to get it? And so that's part of the book too, is like I wrote like a little mini chapter at the end called Canceling Cancel Culture, because I just feel like, man, like, if we keep canceling everybody for everything, there's not going to be anybody left, and I just, if we can learn to have more grace for each other and for ourselves, recognizing like, dude, like every person, if you're a believer and you read the Bible, if you're not a believer and you read the Bible, like if you read the Bible, every single human in that book was jacked up, other than Jesus. He's the only one who wasn't just a total idiot. You got all these guys who are quote unquote heroes, and they're just messing up right and left, just failure after failure after failure after failure. Stuff that, like, I mean, gosh, if the internet was around, like, they would not have lived to tell the tale. You know what I mean? And so I'm sort of grateful that I grew up in a non-internet age. I grew up sort of right when the internet was coming out. Like I remember when we had like a Commodore 64, huge computer, and we got like the kind of dial-up internet that took 900 years to connect, and then like every web page took 10 minutes, but there wasn't, you had chat rooms, but there was no social media. Like I had a MySpace, and that was like, wow, and then Facebook. Like one of the beautiful things about Facebook is it gives me like a microscope on what a dummy I was 12 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, because it's like you get to see on this day in 2007, you wrote this. And it's like Stephen is eating a salad, and that's like literally, talk about the art of getting wrong. There was no thought put into it, but it was new. And, but it, like everything is on the public record for all of eternity. And when that becomes the case and people become holier than thou art, not necessarily just about, you don't have to be Christian to be holier than thou art. You can be holier than thou about politics or, veganism or, whatever. Like that's just the natural, we want to feel good about ourselves. And a lot of times that means that it comes from putting others down to build us up, which is a terrible way to go about things. And it's not, eventually, like there's no one left to put down. You know what I mean? So I think part of the book too is like sort of reclaiming our humanity, and recognizing that like, hey, it's okay to be human. And that's not an excuse or a license to go be a dummy. It's not an excuse or a license for me to go say something hateful or do something hateful or whatever. Because by no means like is that, I don't think that should be in our hearts, but the fact that I am a human means that I will do that. I will say something hateful. I will do something hateful. I will be selfish. I will be thoughtless. I will be careless. I'll do all of those things, as people tend to do, And so what's my response after that happens, And when people do that to me, what's my response after that happens? Because we want to live by the same standard that, we want people to treat us the way that we want to treat them, right? So that's really a lot of the hope of the book too, is like, and hopefully there's just the beauty of reclaiming our humanity and recognizing that like, it's going to be okay if we mess up or someone messes up against us. Like the world isn't going to end, the sun's still going to rise tomorrow. And like in the end, I'll probably get more out of this than I lost, if I look at it the right way and shift my perspective a little more.
I think that we have a term called cancel culture to begin with is just honestly, it's insane. And I never thought growing up that I would eventually live in a world where people are trying to cancel another person based on what they've said or even what they've done. It just, what happened to freedom of speech and your own decision making and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it needs to stop because like you said, there'll be no one left to cancel. The cancelers will cancel themselves because they don't agree with the things that they're actually talking about, which just makes me laugh entirely.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy world. It really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like how you also mentioned it doesn't give you license or an excuse to go out there and do everything wrong because, I'm human, I'm flawed, I'm going to make mistakes. But yes, the mistakes will come. And it's ultimately like what you were saying, it's how you react to them. It's like, what's your response? And I think there's a lot of people that I listen to, they're saying we need more empathy, we need more kindness, and we need a lot of love in society as a whole. And they're the ones that are getting canceled too, because it's like, no, you're wrong. We don't need that. That just surprises me, or not really surprise me. It boggles my mind, man. It really does.
I mean, it is surprising. I feel like it is surprising because it's the anonymity of it. I feel that really gives people license to do that. Because if I know you, and do you have kids? Are you married?
No.
Do you have kids? Anything like that? Okay.
Not that I know of.
If you know me, and you genuinely actually care about people, you're not going to if you mess with that, you're messing with 7 kids who are going to starve. You're messing with, you just never do that kind of thing with, I think you would never do that kind of thing to someone you actually know.
Your friend. Yeah.
I think my earbud just died. One sec. Try that. Talk again real quick.
How's that?
Hang on a second. I don't know what's going on. Why did I do that? Why did you do that?
Technology, man. It's going up against it. It's trying to cancel this conversation.
It's like out here. It's the big brother who's listening in is like, no, we're not talking about that. You're canceled.
You're getting on our nerve. So we're going to cancel.
Exactly. So funny, man. Yeah, I think, it just comes down to, for a while, I was very involved in trying to help. We lived in St. Louis, which is a very racially divided city. And we wanted to be people of peace in St. Louis to help sort of bridge the gap a little bit, which obviously I'm a white guy, so I can only do so much. But a lot of what that looked like was like listening, having coffee with people, having lunch with people, having breakfast with people, going out and having a bourbon or whatever. Is St. Louis, Missouri's Budweiser, city. So go have a beer. There's like more microbreweries in St. Louis than I think anywhere else, and maybe the world. I don't know. But it's a lot of like relational, and a lot of what came down to was just ignorance. Like there are things that I didn't understand that I'm asking questions, and you're giving permission, and it's a safe place, and giving a platform and saying, hey, like, tell me, like, where are we missing it? And huge groups of people getting together and asking, where are we missing it? And it's done in mutual respect, and it's done with empathy, and it's done with compassion. I don't know how much I can't calculate what a huge impact that makes when you're willing to just sit down with people and say, hey, you said this and it kind of hit me wrong. So let's go have some coffee and talk about it. So I can kind of figure out where you're coming from, and you can figure out where I'm coming from and why that would hurt me, and maybe I realize upon hearing why that felt such a wrong way to you. Yeah, I was definitely in the wrong for that, something that maybe didn't even make sense to me and that I didn't think through all the ramifications, and then they'll say, oh yeah, your motive wasn't what I initially thought it would be. So there's a lot of being a peacemaker that comes along with this as well. Is like, you got to have a relationship with people if you're going to have peace. And the problem is a lot of relational peace doesn't sell. You know what I mean? Like there's no outrage there to fuel the flame and get the engagement or whatever. It's just sort of done like behind closed doors, and then the world's a more beautiful, better place, and you don't get the pat on the back or the high five or the rallies or the whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just done. And so I think that's a huge part of our family too, is like, we don't stand on these soapboxes. Like, I don't talk about stuff like, a lot of people will message us and be like, you need to talk about this more. You need to talk about whatever. And I'm like, dude, like, we're going to show, like, we're just going to try as best as we can to be an example of what it looks like to love, respect, honor, believe the best about people, and if we need to have those conversations with people, we're going to do that in private. I'm connected enough at this point. Like, if somebody says something, I can probably get an audience with them and like, hey, tell me what you mean by that. You know what I mean? Rather than like, oh, I need to go to Twitter and be a butt, like, I just don't see the point of that. There's a line, John Mayer's Continuum album, I would contest, is the greatest album of all time. Many people would maybe fight me on that, but I just think it is lyrically, everything about it. And there's a song called Belief, and it says, is there anyone who's ever changed their mind from the paint on a sign? Is there anyone who ever, is there anyone you can recall has ever broken whatever their thought was over something someone yelled real loud one time? Like, that's not how it works. Like, we listen to each other better when we're doing it in a respectful manner, and we're doing it in a way that assumes the best about them first. You know what I mean? And that's part of our humanity. That's what I mean by coming back to the humanity. It's like, if I'm starting at a starting point of, yeah, they probably didn't mean something by that. They're probably not trying to be disruptive. They're probably not trying to do, if that's my starting point, is like believing the best, I feel like that's a little more productive, than like going guns blazing into something.
I think these days,
I know that if I do something, it's never, there are people who are naturally poor, ill-intended, but I think that's the exception to the rule. Like, for me, that's the exception to the rule. I'm almost never going to be the guy who intentionally says something inflammatory or does something whatever, you know what I mean? So when someone comes to me and already believes the best, just putting it in that perspective, like, I'm going to respond a lot better to that than someone coming waving their finger at me and accusing me of stuff. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I think those people as well, like, that love the confrontation in person, those come few and far between. It's because we can't actually have that physical connection, which is what cancel culture, I believe, is ultimately really canceling, is the connection between people. And because part of that connection is having an opinion. Part of that connection is understanding that we are all human. We have our beliefs, we have our ways of doing things, and that's where ultimately the conversation and the ability to ask questions and curiosity, but they're trying to get rid of all of that. And I don't think it's right, because part of being human, part of being alive is the ability to be curious, to ask questions all the time, to have conversations, to have disagreements. Like, that is ultimately, that's fun. Like, that is the joy of life. Like, if you don't have that, you've got literally nothing. You're just walking around aimlessly. I truly believe, but people these days as well, they're easily offended, and they get offended online, and they don't want to continue that conversation because they're offended, because they don't want to forgive, because forgiveness is hard work. How can I forgive that person for saying this? How can I actually speak to them properly and hear their side of the story and why they said it to begin with? No, it's just I'll cut them off completely. I mean, that's a conscious choice to do that. That's not a mistake. That you've chosen to do it. And I think that if we were all to just come together and just say, look, let's ask questions here. Let's listen intently, properly, not trying to force your opinion onto them, but do it as Christ said, do it in love, do it with empathy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say as well.
Yeah.
That's my
I think
take.
the world will be a lot better place.
I think so too. And I guess we can hope ultimately that things do get better. And I mean, people like yourself, Stephen, that put out this kind of content and have conversations with people like myself. I mean, the beauty of this is we probably don't agree on everything under the sun, but we can still be respectful. We can still be honoring, and we can still have a genuine, authentic, and vulnerable conversation with each other, which I think needs to happen a lot more of with other people.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. I think, and you do see that happening in the podcast world a little more. I mean, I think that's sort of gone in a lot of media, unfortunately. I don't know if that's because of ratings or numbers or money or sponsors or what. I have no clue. But in the podcasting world, there are a lot of guys that are stepping up and doing that. And so, I mean, I think it's just, I looked at who you've interviewed, and I'm just like blown away because there's a lot of differing viewpoints and worldviews and perspectives that you represent just in your podcast alone, and so getting to do that where everyone has common ground, I just feel like that's so honoring of just trusting. It goes back to believing the best in people. It's like you can trust people with the information to like filter through their worldview, but you don't have to get offended at everything. Like you can represent a point of view without having to necessarily say, like, if I came out and said some stuff that you didn't agree with, you're not endorsing me for that just by having me on your show. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's something beautiful about that because that's how real life is. When you go to work, you have coworkers who don't agree with you on stuff. When you go home for Thanksgiving, you have family members who don't agree with you on everything. Really have, at least in my world, like there are family members that I'm like, wow, this is going to be really interesting if I engage this conversation right now, But at the end of the day, they're your family. Like you love them and you're going to listen and you're going to be respectful and honoring. And I just feel like, dude, people have got to learn that art, And I do think it comes back to the humility piece that if you can start to see, all the ways that you've messed it up, whether that's in your words and your actions and your thoughts, in your procrastination, and you're taking shortcuts, and you're trying to get around the system, and you're whatever. I mean, there's a billion, infinite ways that you can mess up in any given day. And when you start to have a sober-minded look at yourself with that, man, it really, I just really think it will shape the way you see everybody else in a much healthier light.
Mm. I've got family members like that too. And I've got a very small family. And I was recently having a conversation with someone in my family that went on the offensive. And I just said, look, you have your belief system. I have mine. We're going to get absolutely nowhere if you're constantly trying to attack. And what is it? I asked him the question. I'm like, what is it to you that I believe this? Does it hurt you in any way, shape, or form? And I think his response to that was trying to twist it in a way. And I just said, look, I love you because you're in my family and I always will. but I need you to understand, or try to understand, this is my choice to believe this and live this way. And if you can accept that, we're going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other side of the coin too, is that approaching life from this perspective doesn't mean that you're a doormat or that you can't have boundaries, or you know what I mean? Like, you need that. Like, that's healthy. That's right. It's good. But, I do think sometimes we use those things as excuses, and even get upset when people are trying to believe the best. You know what I mean? Like, I got a comment on my Instagram yesterday that made me laugh a little bit, because it was me with my sons, and I've got two kids from Africa, from Ethiopia, and one son from China. And the guy was like, "Look at you. You're so, compassionate and diverse." And I mean, he was being real sarcastic. And I was like, yeah, man. Thanks. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Like, I knew he wasn't being serious, but it's like, dude, why would you get offended at that? Why would you feel the need to write? You know what I mean? And so a boundary for me is that usually whenever those kinds of things come in, I just don't engage it, because it just, it's not worth it. Like, I'm not going to win somebody over in a comment. I'm not probably going to make them realize, oh, wow, I've been so unkind, whatever. And then just from my own standpoint, like, I'm never going to leave a comment like that. So those are boundaries that are real. And, we manage our comments pretty aggressively, not in like a bad way, but like, we're a family channel, we're family content. My kids read our comments, like, so, we block a lot of words, just because, dude, for me, it's just so much easier to there's a lot of bots and a lot of trolls that are just gonna, and I'm like, man, I don't have time for that. Like, there's too much beautiful life out there to live. And and then from time to time, someone will send a DM. We're just protective of the community that we're trying to build, if that makes sense. So it's not that we're afraid of, we're not afraid of controversy, or we're not afraid of like confrontation. If we need to have a conversation with people, we are. But I want to bring as much humanity into it as I can. You know what I mean? So we keep it on our turf as much as we can, because we do have young kids in our crew. You know what I mean? And so I find that really does increase our quality of life, rather than having to always worry about this and that, like that someone's saying or bringing or whatever. We're able to just kind of focus on what we're doing and keep being who we are, which I think is good. So, it's a different type of boundary than the going to, Thanksgiving, but it's similar to like, if you're going to Thanksgiving and ahead of time, you send out a text and just say, hey guys, we're not going to talk about politics this year, or whatever. Like, and then people generally kind of abide by that whenever you get there, and then you can have a nice, hopefully, like, stress-free Thanksgiving. I don't know. Do you guys have Thanksgiving in Australia?
We don't know, but
I know it's like not the pilgrims and whatever, but like, what do you have that's sort of similar to that? That's not just like a Christmas dinner. I could say Christmas,
That pretty much goes on during Christmas lunch, or used to, but nowadays, because it's pretty much just my family. So I got a very, very small family, man.
Right.
So I guess that's the benefit of not having to go out to someone else's house, have a massive big bash, and then have this long as political conversation the entire time. This is family, and most of us agree on the same thing anyway. So we're all we just bag out the other side of things. We shouldn't speak bad, I know, but that's kind of our equivalent to Thanksgiving.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Yeah, we have a huge, I mean, obviously we have a huge family, but then, my mom and dad sort of split up when I was a kid. Amanda's family is all together, but she has 3 sisters. And so they kind of all have their thing and then they're very close. So when we get together with our families, it's like huge. I mean, it's just huge. Like when our family goes anywhere, it's huge, So then when you invite the rest in, we did Christmas, we went skiing in Utah this year. And I think there were like 21 people or 22 people or something skiing in Utah. And it was so fun, and we just all kind of said ahead of time. And we usually, we get along really well. But we just said ahead of time, like, let's just like keep it like super chill this year. And everyone did, it was great.
Amazing when the family are actually all, civil.
Yeah. Exactly. Our family really is, they really are. But I'm just trying to draw like those sort of parallels of like what life could be like online if we just sort of treated each other like people you're having Thanksgiving lunch with, like we're all human. So let's just start treating each other like it,
Once again, an important point. I mean, we can continue talking about this, I'm sure, for hours. We're probably going to have to get a coffee or something. And just keep it going, man. But I've got a couple more questions for you because I do want to be respectful and let you get back to your kids because I know they're probably waiting. Like, where's Dad? He's been gone for ages. But
they're having a blast outside, actually. We're living in an RV right now. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we're trying to build a house. We moved into an RV for what we thought was going to be 3 months, 4 months. And it's looking like it's going to be a year, which is crazy. But that just means lots of outdoor time. And it's a beautiful time of year for that. And the kids get home and they go play basketball with the neighbors and football and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's, I'm actually in our living room right now, which is...
I was going to ask, man. I was like, you look like you're in an RV.
I'm in an RV. Yeah, that's what we are.
Pretty cool, man. Honestly, if that's an RV, I got to get me one of them.
It's pretty sweet. It is pretty. Well, we have 9 people living in it. Now it's 8 because we moved our oldest out. But you needed to get something that could fit a lot of people, so we did.
What was it like becoming a dad at 20 years old, man? Like I'm 25 and I can't imagine myself as a dad.
Yeah. It's babies raising babies, and I talk a lot about the fact that like, you're really not ready. You're never ready, you're never going to be ready. Like you get ready, you become ready when you're doing it, and that's that way with like all of life kind of, like you're not ready to get married until you just do it. And then like you become ready as you're, you know what I mean? You're not ready to like take that other job that maybe you don't feel completely prepared for, or start that company that maybe you don't feel completely prepared to do. Or, for us, like starting YouTube, like we didn't feel ready for that. We didn't know how to make videos, and yet here we are. And that's what we do for a living. So I think as a 20-year-old, like, man, yeah, I was such a knucklehead, and I still am a knucklehead, but my wife's incredible. She just really is. And she really led in so many ways with such compassion and her family was amazing. Like her parents were so supportive. My family was so supportive. I know that's not the case for everybody, but in our case, it was like our family. I was still managing a pizza shop, making nothing, so we were really poor early on. And that was maybe the hardest part, like I think we had $100 a month grocery budget. So we were eating like shoulder steak, and there's like $2 shoulder steak and a can of green beans for dinner every night. And, that kind of thing. And then, we were living in a little bitty apartment and, so a lot of that is just like, I really don't know any different. Like I sort of started out life on my own as a dad, so I don't have anything to really compare it to. Like there's a lot of people who are like, wait to have kids until later on in life because you have so much living to do and so much learning who you are and so much adventuring that you could be doing or whatever. Well, like I learned who I am in a different way, but I still learned who I am. And maybe it took me a while to get to where I am today and the guy I am today. But like I've been like 45 different people just since I had our firstborn 20 years ago. So like you don't really, that's a sort of feels like a flawed argument to me. It's like, you're not going to know who you are before you get married, and you're not going to know who you are before you become a parent. Like you become who you are. You're always becoming who you are. You're not going to stop having adventures just because you have kids. Like we've never known anything different, but like people would look at our life and say, these guys are like adventurers, like I mentioned earlier, like we like to do stuff and we like to do stuff together, and we've seen the world. And I never saw the world growing up. Like I think I went on a Mexico mission trip in 5th grade, and that's like the extent of traveling I ever did anywhere. That was it. And like we've done a lot, like, and our kids have gotten to be a part of that, which I think is cool. That starting out with that hunger and thirst and desire while having kids means that they get to experience all that with you in a lot of ways, which is really cool. I mean, that's, I think, a unique thing. I get the added benefit now that I've got five teenagers, I joke that if I hadn't already had my midlife crisis, I would sure be having one now. But like, I get the added benefit that like now on this side of it all, I get to rediscover my wife in ways that, maybe we didn't get the same kind of thing when we were first starting out because we already had young kids. But now we're like in sort of that stage of life where we're re-falling in love and we're getting to sort of recommit. And it sort of feels like a new beginning and a new birth to our marriage. And like like I'm getting to know her in all new ways, which I think is maybe part of the life cycle of a marriage anyway. But like, I don't feel like I missed out on anything having kids really young. I feel like it really enhanced my life in ways that I maybe really would have missed out on had I not. And that's not to say that that's for everybody, like different people are different levels. I'm just saying, like, I certainly wasn't ready to be a dad at 20, but God really made me ready and continues to, because I'm not ready to be a dad at 38, like I'm still a goober, and still a knucklehead and mess up. So it's a day by day, like, I'm so grateful that God has entrusted me with these amazing kids, because I certainly don't deserve it, So I don't know. I think it's all perspective, and it definitely gives you a drive to make sure you're keeping your crap together, because when there are little people at home needing you to not be an idiot, that helps, It's accountability and it's motivation. And it's, that said, I talked about it a little bit earlier. I was a workaholic, like crazy, like hours, and just chasing after that dream, chasing after what I thought success would look like. And I missed some things too, that I'm grateful that now I haven't fully lost that chance. Like I've still got kids at home and I still get to be a part of their life, and I still get to, you know what I mean? But like, I get to do it now in the afterglow of running really, really hard for a long time. So it's almost like, I don't know that I regret having done all that, because it sort of created the life that we have now. But I'm learning from that to sort of course correct in this season now, if that makes sense.
You're not going to be a perfect dad. I don't think that's
right
ever on the cards.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, yeah, for me and my stage of life that I'm at now, I know that I personally am not ready to be a dad. That being said, I'm not against being a dad later on. I want to be a dad, later on. Got to find a woman first and marry her.
That's helpful.
Yes. that is on the cards eventually. But yeah, I think I'm in the workaholic stage at the moment because I just started this and I'm like, well, I want to keep building it. I want to see where it goes. And I think it'd be selfish of me to, give it up and lots of things and questions. And different stages of life. But I like how you mentioned that you're never really ready. It's like thrust upon you, learn quickly. And but it's all good to.
Yeah. You don't know. Tomorrow you might meet the one, Yeah. Heck, the one may be listening to this podcast right now.
I hope she is.
Send me a little Instagram message today. Like, dude,
send me.
I've been looking for you.
Slide into the DMs, just casually.
Like, you never know. And like, you may not be ready, but like, you'll sure as heck get ready. You know what I mean? Like, you'll know, and you'll get ready. And it's the same. It's the same with everything in life. You knew you weren't ready probably I don't know. Did you, when you started this podcast, were you like, yes, I'm ready. Like, I'm going to get McConaughey. I'm going to get Tony Robbins. I'm going to get, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm going to get all these guys on and it's going to be amazing. Like you probably had like a thought, like this could be really cool, and then you went for it. And I think that's how most of life goes. Like you can be a certain level of ready, but there's no guarantees that it's going to go well. And that doesn't mean don't do it. It might mean do it anyway, because it might go well, it might actually work out, which is kind of cool.
I think it's exciting. If you put it like that, it is very, very exciting. But I think my mind, what it does is it overanalyzes things and puts things into gigantic perspective rather than just focusing on the here and now moment, which I know, and I preach on it more times than I care to admit. And I've got to start living it more. But I'm like I said, I'm human. I need reminding. So thank you, Stephen, for reminding me. I appreciate it. and future wife, if you are listening to this, don't be afraid to reach out. Because I wouldn't say no if you're the one. So there we go.
There you go.
But Stephen, man, like I really do appreciate your time. I know we could continue going on and on, which I would love to have you back on, guaranteed in the near future. You kind of remind me of Paul Rudd, to be honest.
Dude, I get it sometimes. That's funny. Okay.
Yeah, your mannerisms, the way you talk, the way you look too. So 100%, you're Paul Rudd.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'll take it. That's the guy that never ages, Yeah,
100%. I don't know how they do it, but anyway, where do you want people to get a copy of your new book, man, before I ask you the final two questions?
Yeah, they can go to theartofgettingitwrong.com. It's everywhere. I mean, if you're shopping at, I don't know, do you have Barnes and Nobles over there? Barnes and Noble?
No, we have Dimmicks, which is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty much just everywhere. Like it's on Amazon. It's on, I think it's pretty much everywhere. My publisher says that it's everywhere. And Audible, the whole deal. We just recorded the audiobook 2 weeks ago. I did it with my wife. We did some like special featurey type stuff in there in between chapters, which is really fun. I mean, I don't care where you get it, just get it. Cause like I've got 7 kids and they need to eat. So other than that, you can, I've got links on our social media, at Stephen Miller with a PH and at the Miller Fam. That's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all that stuff. We're all there. So yeah.
Well, I'll make sure everyone knows where to get a copy and definitely support Stephen, his family. With 7 kids, he's right. They do need to eat. So you'll be doing him a huge favor.
Too, yeah.
but Stephen, man, I can't wait to get my hands on my own personal copy and read it and share it with everyone. I feel like our story and what we've experienced is very similar in a lot of different ways. But yeah, can't wait to share it with my audience and this conversation too. But this is my well, it's a question I love asking people at the end or towards the end, but what do you love the most about yourself and your story?
And that's tough. I think I love the most about my story that it's not over yet. Because I think as long as it's over, you know, I can't do anything about it, you know. But if even if like today is a total mess up of a day, you know, there's always tomorrow, you know, there's always the next day, there's always, and I guess that probably leads me to the thing I like most about myself, which is my indomitable hope. That makes sense. Like, because if I didn't have that, I think the fact that my story's not over might be like kind of crushing, you know what I mean? But the fact that I just like, I can't stop like hoping that tomorrow will be better than today and working toward that end, if that makes sense. So like some people call that optimism, but back, you know, at the end of the day, like optimism is not really helpful if it's not based and grounded in hope. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it's just like, I see skies of blue and clouds of white, you know, like it doesn't really do much for me in the end. But when there's a hope, that's a living hope. And as a believer, I have a living hope and I'm like clinging to that because it's clinging to me. Then tomorrow's a good day. You know, tomorrow has infinite possibilities, whether it's a good day or not, like it's not the end, you know what I mean? And even if it is the last day, like on earth, like there's eternity after, you know what I mean? So I think the joy that comes from hope-filled optimism is probably my favorite thing about me, if that makes sense. It's like Buddy the Elf. I like smiling. Smiling's my favorite, you know, that's probably it. And my favorite thing about my story is that it's not over. Like there's a lot of beautiful moments that I'm super proud of. And a lot of like, I love our family and that I get to be a part of that. Like those are all amazing. But like, there's so many more days of that ahead. Yeah. You know what I mean? And even if there are a lot of valleys, and there are a lot of valleys, like that's not the end either, you know? So I know that's a really philosophical answer for you on that. And I probably could have just said, I'm a happy guy, you know, and you'd have been like, okay, cool answer, you know.
you're tempting me to go down another rabbit hole with you, another philosophical area, but definitely going to have you back on again, man. I think we're going to continue this conversation even more. But this is my all-time favorite question. I love asking this one at the very end of my conversations. It's a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Oh my gosh. Oh man. That will be an extremely embarrassing video if they were able to show all that. Man, I think what I would want it to say and show in my life is that I was the furthest thing from perfect, because I am, you know, but I was consistent and faithful, you know, and I define faithfulness in that, like, you know, David wasn't necessarily faithful in the Bible, but it was his repentance, you know, that defined his heart after God's heart. You know what I mean? And I would hope that at the end of my life, that people would say, man, that was a guy who was faithful to his family, to his wife, to his kids, to his God, and really just loved people well, you know? That's what I would hope. I would hope that it would be, man, when I was around Stephen, like I walked away feeling better about me and about my circumstances. That's what I hope my life is marked by. I tell this story in the book. And I try not to give a lot of this away, but I think that's really helpful in this situation. My wife and I were in Utah last year for our anniversary, and man, it was like we were starving. We just hiked the Narrows, and we got to our place, and there's nowhere to eat nearby. And there was this one place, and it was like this restaurant in the country club, and I ordered the food, and it had been out, an hour and a half at that point, still not ready. And these two like old couples, like in their, late 80s, early 90s, walk in dressed to the nines. And I think they're probably on like their anniversary or something like that. And they were on their anniversary, like dinner, like I guess they got married on the same day or something. And they're like, hey, reservation for 4. And the girl looks up and goes, that's next week. And the guy goes, no, honey, it's today, and hands her the card. And it's like the reservation card. That's the day. And she's like, oh no, I wrote it down the wrong time. Like, I'm so sorry. We actually closed for a wedding. We can't do this, And she looks like she's just about to like break down bawling. Like she's like, her life is over, kind of thing. And the guy, he's got like a bowler hat on. Like, he just looks like a total stud. He walks over and goes, sweetie, you can only play the hand you're dealt. And today's just not in the cards for us. So we'll see you next week. And just like they turn around, he puts his arm out, his wife takes his arm, and they walk out with so much style and so much class, and just amazed. Like I was blown away because I was so frustrated that I hadn't gotten my food, and like they were ignoring me, and I'm just like, dude, like I'm so hungry. And just to watch this happen, they probably spent, a month planning this night and gone out and bought their clothes and just all this stuff. And for them to have handled it with so much style and class and grace and compassion, I was just like, oh, and I called my wife and I said, babe, and I told her the story. I was like, that's what I want to be like when I'm old. I want us to be like that when we're old. And she said, yeah, we should probably start doing that now then, if we want to be that way when we're old. And I was like, okay, like this is the wisdom of my wife. Like she's so wise. And like, yeah. So at the end of the day, whenever it's, I'm 100 years old and they're putting together, like, I hope that I'm the man I'm becoming anyway now, that kind of guy that whenever that film is showing, like people are like, yeah, when I walked away or he walked away, I felt better about myself. I felt better about who God is. I felt better about life because he just had this indomitable hope and joy. And that's what I hope. And yeah, again, long answer, but I got to be that guy now if I'm going to be that guy then,
That is literally the perfect way to wrap up this conversation with a story like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, man. Thanks for asking the good questions, man.
That realization and that wisdom too. My goodness, why wait till you're older to start doing the things that you need to do right now?
Yep.
Yes. I almost don't want to end this conversation now. Damn it. Far out. But Stephen, man, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your advice, your stories, and for just joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.